maybe, 6 or 8 months, but is relatively straightforward because it's optimizing, the data that you already have and the execution systems that you already have of executing those price changes at stores. So all those other systems, right, getting good quality data, getting the execution of those price changes down to your stores, like replacing that or getting clean data is incredibly difficult. But if you're doing that well as a company today, to switch from Revionics to Demand Tech, which is really just about the optimization of prices, not the execution of prices, those are easier, systems to replace.
Mm. Got it. So I guess what would be the impetus for change? I mean, is it a cost thing? Is it that wanting to seeing a substantial increase in the functionality and or user interface, user friendliness, whatever? I mean, just curious. I mean, what does it take? Is it just a slight bit of kind of a slightly better sort of business case, or like really substantial to justify the pain or the challenge in migrating from one system to the other?
Yeah. So again, given that let's say the optimization side of this is not that painful to replace, it's really more of a function, let's say, of, how much have you depreciated these solutions, or if they're software as a service, which many of them are, subscription models, you're paying that cost. So I would say it's more about innovation in the marketplace, right? Because these, generally speaking, these tools have among the highest returns on any retail software, right? So many of the things that we do in retail of, point of sale systems or inventory systems, I mean, some of them are difficult to generate a real tangible return. But you can measure very clearly, the returns on margin and other items by implementing these tools. So usually what is the impetus is some sort of advancement in the marketplace around the, use of, artificial intelligence, or something different that says, simply said, maybe there's a different secret sauce in a new vendor that's come to the market, or an existing vendor that has modernize the platform that allows us to be able to use, the analytics that weren't being kind of appropriately applied before, right? We've all probably had the opposite of a good experience with these, where the recommendations coming out of these engines, just had to be overridden by the buyers and the planners and other people, because they just didn't really make any sense. And so as the technology's gotten better, it's really driven the impetus to continue to upgrade when new innovations happen. I wouldn't really say it's a cost issue, right? Of course we all care about cost, and if some vendor had the same capability at half the cost, I'm sure we would look at that, but it's not usually driven by the cost in the marketplace. It's really driven more by the benefit, I would say.
Got it. Okay. What's the
value
of...
So just quickly, just a good example to maybe bring that home would be, 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, no one was really using weather information as an attribute to help you determine pricing. And once that became more mainstream and got embedded into the software, and we actually had the weather data, which many companies don't have, right? But if you actually had weather data, or the vendor brought weather data, let's say, then you could start to apply that. And so that would be a good example of a reason to say, if we thought we'd get a material difference in the result and the accuracy of the result because of that innovation, we would maybe change to another platform.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, that makes sense. What's the solutions we're talking about here are best of breed. We're not talking JDA or Oracle or their suites. What's the consideration for a larger retailer around going with a point solution for management, price management and optimization versus a module of something broader?
Well, yeah, I think and this is a general statement, but our experience typically, and I would say this is even, beyond my current experience, this is just in retail in general, is that the larger players, have focused more on the transactional systems, the Oracles and the SAPs and the other large vendors like that. They have bought their way into the space, right? So with Oracle, for example, it was ProfitLogic, and there's been more niche players that have been kind of built these relatively scientific but not complex solutions that have been about generating quick return without having to implement 2 years worth of hardware and infrastructure. And so the niche players have kind of really grown in this space, and then ultimately companies like Oracle and SAP have bought several of them to then integrate them with their core systems of their price execution systems, because that has been a challenge. You could go out and find one of these price optimization niche players, but you still have to take that information and somehow feed it to your downstream systems, which are often Oracle and SAP and others. So I think Oracle and SAP kind of saw that they were losing that business to people and said, well, why don't we find a way to integrate our price execution systems, which everyone has, to some new price optimization solution that was a third party maybe.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay.
I mean, generally said, if your question is also about, let's say, best of breed versus a monolithic company, I mean, generally speaking, we find in the marketplace, if you're looking for the best capabilities from a supply chain optimization perspective, you're going to talk to more of the niche companies that have really focused on that capability versus these larger companies that don't often bring the same sort of expertise that you would if you were to talk to one of the smaller, maybe smaller is the wrong word, but more of a niche company that's their specialty.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Let's turn to the providers, or the competitive side a little bit. That you're aware of, are you familiar with any other solutions in price management and optimization other than those three?
I am familiar with them because they've been through RFP processes, but those were the ones that, as I said, have the most experience with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so maybe let's start with a general question. I mean, how do you see competitors sort of positioning themselves in the price management and optimization space? What's the nature of competition in your view?
In what way what do you mean?
Well, I mean, in a lot of other software markets that I've seen, I mean, well, let's take, for example, like, are you familiar with Clear Demand? I'm
not.
Oh, okay. Well, TXT on the merchandising side, it's not really as much grocery. Never mind. Well, an example would be, in some spaces, I see software packages that are positioned low in cost, low functionality, easy to implement, versus those that are much fuller functionality, higher cost sorts of solutions. So, price being a dimension on which people are differentiating. Is there AI in this space could potentially, where some competitors are pushing AI into the optimization, other pieces.
Mm-hmm. What differentiates them in your view? That's probably the
broadest question.
Are you still there, Joe?
Are you there? I think maybe. Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, I think my headset must have cut out. So I guess the simplest question, the simplest way I would put it is, how do you see these competitors differentiate themselves, or do you, or are they all kind of the same? I do. What are the dimensions on which you think they're different?
Yeah, that's helpful. So I would say a few things. One is, you mentioned AI. So I would say the first way they're differentiating themselves is really on their actual analytics and the data science behind how they're generating these insights, let's say. These solutions have been around for 20 years. And, they've gotten more and more sophisticated, where you used to just take kind of your point of sale data and your demand forecast and, a few other components and run regressions over these things, right? So I would say they've differentiated themselves by the actual data science that they use. Is one. I think that the next may be around the services that they offer, right? So if you take a company like SAS, for example, they're one of the most well thought of companies from an analytics perspective, but many people don't understand how their software works, right? It's like a bit of a black box. And so many of these companies have started to differentiate themselves by also providing services, data scientists, data engineers, people to sit with your merchandising team to really help you understand kind of what the technology is doing and how to integrate it into your decision-making